Cool. Well, welcome, Kate. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Thanks
Thank
for
you for
coming back
having
on.
me.
Yeah, absolute pleasure. It was such an important conversation, I think, that we had last time. And there were some really important topics that we covered. And for anyone who's tuning into this one, hasn't had a chance yet to go back and listen to the first episode or the first part of this conversation, episode 7, I highly recommend that you do that. We covered quite a range of topics, from mental health, working in the NHS as a midwife, supporting those in that industry as you have, transitioning over to academia, Bournemouth University, and we even went into the complexities and challenges of IVF. So it's quite an amazing, broad and interesting conversation that I'm sure, when people hear this, there's going to be people that get a lot out of it. But I do want to acknowledge, first and foremost, you for first and foremost sharing, just like stepping forward and choosing to make it public and choosing to discuss difficult topics, important topics. And really, I think without individuals like yourself doing that, then how are we going to talk about these things, and how are we going to break some of the stigmas and some of the sort of misconceptions and what have you? So just wanted to really acknowledge you for that.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and so today, again, we're not doing the light work here. We're going in deep and into more important topics of conversation and around mental health, but in particular, it's not been an easy couple of years globally, and things have pretty much, well, it's been a wild ride, isn't it? Let's just say that. And
absolutely,
I guess when you apply that kind of global pressure onto pre-existing struggles that people have, things happen, and one of those things is suicide. And that is something that I've dedicated my life to, supporting, raising awareness, helping individually and helping collectively to address the suicide. I guess we could call it a suicide pandemic with the figures that are out there. But I know that you've got your particular story, your personal story with that. And I was wondering if we could maybe dive into that and discuss that here today.
Absolutely. Yeah. Of course. I think it's probably important to kind of have a little bit of context of where that kind of came from. I've always had a really close, loving family that have been very open and talking about everything from how life starts to how life ends. So I can remember, and I think I probably was 4 or 5, my rabbit dying. Or actually, I think we had to take the rabbit to the vet, and the vet said, "I'm gonna have to put the rabbit down." And I can remember the vet saying to my dad, "Do you want Kate to go, and we can do this later?" And he said, "No, this is part of life. We have to do this." So I understood the circle of what life was very, very early on in my life, and I think that's been so necessary for me to kind of understand and comprehend what death was. And then quite soon after that, I probably was 6, my granddad died very suddenly. He's sitting in a chair. He was an old man. He was sitting in a chair and he fell asleep and didn't wake up again. So again, I then experienced that death in that guise, that it's a normal part of life. You do this, you do that, and then you go on and you die. And it's not, it's not an awful thing. It's not something that we never talk about. It's normal. And so then we fast forward for quite a long time, and we get to the point where my dad is ill in hospital, and he's the practical one, right? So he's the one that is, this is what we're going to do, these are how we're going to do it. If there's a crisis, he would make a plan. So that's what he did. That's who he was as a person. And when you don't have that in your kind of family unit anymore, because we've not needed that, right? he's been that person.
Yeah.
So we've not needed as adults to really make those strong ways of thinking about that stuff.
Sure.
It then turns to us, and I think that's where my mental health got worse, and my mum's and my brother's absolutely did as well, and we all struggled with it. I tried my best to be that practical person, and I think I did that role. I took over that role because at the time my brother and my mum couldn't do it. But it probably detrimentally affected them both, because we probably all should have done that a bit more. I probably took over that too much and didn't let everyone take those practical steps. So I think that was June 2019. We then struggled through grief through 2020 into 2020, and then COVID hit us, and we then were completely isolated from each other. And I was here at home working. My mum was on her own in her house where she lives, and my brother and his wife were doing the same. And the moment that we got to the point where we couldn't go out, I think it really hit my brother really hard. And I think he'd been secretly managing alcohol, drugs, and depression and anxiety while he was at work. And he was able to do that because you get up, right, you do your job, you have the coffee in the morning, you carry on, you work really long hours, you have a glass of wine to keep yourself going through the day and then into the evening, and then that stopped completely. And I think it took that sticking plaster off, which probably was from earlier on. And he took an overdose and drank a load of wine, but was very fortunate in that he had somebody there who went, I've done this is silly, I need you to help me. And we were very lucky enough, he lives very close to a great London hospital, so his wife took him, and he was looked after really well. But I think it then became very clear very quickly that he was very, very mentally unwell, and that he needed that. And we use this term, and we used to use it a lot when I was working as a mental health midwife, of this, oh, well, that was kind of like a cry for help. I actually don't think that was what that was. I think he was really he didn't want to be here anymore, and he needed to do that. But he kind of came round from that thinking, and he was then that, oh, I am actually here, so I can't be like this anymore, I need to change my behavior. And he spent a long time in an institution called Cloud's House, and they were amazing. They have really supported him for a long time when he was in hospital, and really got him to a place where I can absolutely hand on my heart say now he was probably the most well mentally out of all of us, because he manages and looks after his mental health so acutely all of the time. He is constantly looking after himself, and he's constantly checking in and doing things that they helped him to do. And he is now, I'm such a privilege to be his sister, because he's that person. He's essentially what my dad is now. He is the one that you go, oh my goodness, this has happened, what do I do? and he will either come and be there physically or emotionally put you through whatever is necessary. He has completely done a U-turn than he was when we were facing that awful thing that my dad died so suddenly.
Yeah.
So that's I think it's quite unique. He's embraced his new life of sobriety so intently. He supports so many people now, and he said that's it, and it's who he wants to be. He wants to be that person. He wants to help them. But if he wasn't picked up and looked after at that moment where that happened, we would be looking at something different.
I mean, there's so much ground that you've covered there. That I'm sure that so many can relate to aspects of of that story in you know, especially when you were saying about the shock that came to the family, the void that was left, you know, by that father figure, and the normal process of grief that accompanies that. You know, all of these things happen to us, don't they, oftentimes as humans, really, and generally. And the fact that then it was exacerbated by isolation through COVID and whatnot, that makes it particularly poignant and unique. And I guess as you're telling the story, I tend to sort of see patterns a lot, you know, having worked in this space for so long now, and it's the patterns of action and behaviors and events, if you like, you know. I can sort of follow along with them and see what's happening in many ways, but there's some real fundamental aspects of the human experience, if you like, and humans are built for two main things, and we're built well for them, and that is connection and struggle. We are very good at coping and struggling through things. Suffering, now that's arguably sometimes an option, but struggle, we're built for it first and foremost. And that, when I say that, I hope it's received in the right way. When I say we're built for struggle, is that we can do it. We are built for it. It's in our nature to overcome challenge. And connection is the other thing. Now, on the struggle side of things, in order for us to be able to struggle through some of life's biggest challenges, we have to be resilient. Now, resiliency is something that doesn't just happen, yet you do have to work on that. And that what you mentioned about your brother, you know, having gone through that, and you know, he's literally gone through a textbook hero's journey. You know, he got a call to adventure in the form of life throwing this shock of losing his father, along with the isolation. And you know, he's then crossed this void and this unknown world, and it's probably very scary. And you know, you meet all these like unknown challenges, and then he gets this help, you know, and that help helps him to sort of struggle through the challenges. And then he finds the gold. He then integrates that gold and returns to the known world as a helper, as someone who's now like, oh, that was my journey, and this is what I'm here to do. And now I'm going to help others. And I resonate with that. And that's my story pretty much. I resonate with that so much. And that's what I was saying about the patterns. It's fascinating for me to hear them. So the other thing about connection, human beings is, if you really want to torture a human, isolate them, you know. Solitary confinement in prison, you know, it's torture, really, psychologically. So it's not a wonder, really, is it, that it's been such a difficult time of late. And so what sort of things would you say your brother does on a regular basis now to maintain that resilience?
I think he's much better at identifying, like, I don't mean, I'm saying toxic, but I don't really mean it in the true sense of the word. He's very good at identifying things that aren't beneficial for him. so before, and I think we all have this in us, and I can definitely see this in me. I'm not very good at saying no, so I will just keep going. And I think that's what we all did in different ways after my dad died, is that we would say, yeah, that's fine, I'll do that, that's okay, yeah, I can do this, yeah, that's not a problem. And it's that tiny thing, isn't it? The saying that the small, the straw that broke the camel's back. It's absolutely true. I think his straw was huge. COVID was the thing that did that, but I think that is something that he now doesn't do. So he's puts himself first.
Yeah.
And he's a better man for it.
Yeah, that's a great point. That's actually that's a great point. I'd like to double down on that one, because it's so that response to boundaries, right? It's your boundaries, and saying no, and self-care is essentially what you're saying there, isn't it? It's about, how can you serve someone else if you don't look after yourself first?
Exactly.
The foundations of that. I think that is super important. I think what happens is, logically, we can all kind of probably agree that that's the right thing to do. For example, in the plane crash or plane going down, and the decompression in the cabin, you put the mask on yourself first before you apply it to someone else. We all kind of nod our heads and go, yeah, we'd all do that, sure. And then what happens is, the reality is, our nervous system, sometimes, for most of us, for some of us, our nervous system is stuck in a survival trait from childhood. We adapt throughout our childhood. We encounter adverse experiences as we're growing up, and those adverse experiences make the child adapt in a way that helps them get through that moment. Now, that would be fine, only that moment becomes a character trait, and that character trait can be people pleasing, because you want to maintain the connection to the loved ones around you. If they say do this, you do it. And you sacrifice yourself just to maintain that connection, because we're built for connection. So that becomes a survival trait, becomes our character. So oftentimes, whether it be burnout, whether it be just, like you said, that straw that breaks the camel's back, oftentimes people are running in the red for so long, and it just takes one thing to tip them over the edge, and the resilience cracks. And so that is a good point to sort of highlight, to say that self-care is not a selfish act. That's a super important thing to point out, I think.
I think Jonty and I've had several conversations about how I can better my self-care. So I think that would go on to his second point, is helping other people. So he keeps himself in that really true and in the moment place by helping others and being there for them. So he has lots of people that he helps all the time. But we've had conversations about how I can do that. So that was potentially a reason that I left the NHS, really, I would say, is that he said that's, we had a conversation about how I feel about it and how I want to do this and what I would like to do. And he was able to turn around and say, but that's not healthy for you at the moment. Look at how you're not really going to be able to help anyone else, because you're not really helping yourself. So I think he by helping other people is also something that he keeps himself in that place, because he is able to go, I know I can help you because I've been there, and we can discuss the same feelings, because I can absolutely agree with you that we've been having the same thoughts. Slightly different for me, because our thoughts are slightly different, but on the grand scheme of things of self-care and how do I keep myself mentally strong, we're absolutely, he is that person to be able to do that. And you're absolutely right, you choose that, that fight or flight, freeze, whatever you choose in that moment when you get into a situation that you don't want to be in.
If only it was a choice. If only it was a choice, it's an automatic survival response.
It is, absolutely, isn't it? And you can't change it.
No.
And when you choose those, when that happens to you in that moment when you're little, that you can't really remember because you're so little, it then brings you through to who you are later on, and you can really see that. And my brother always was that let me help, let me please you, let me do that. And that's absolutely why you can see that his straw broke when things changed, but it hasn't changed who he is really, because he still helps people. He's still a people pleaser in a sense, but he now knows that he has to support himself before he can help anyone else.
That's what I would call an integration of a survival trait. That's what integrating a survival trait looks like. It's because it's not like that part of you wasn't authentically you. It's not like there's a part of you that actually genuinely did want to help that person, because there is, but it has to be coming from, you have to be in right relationship to it, and it has to be coming from a healthy place, otherwise it will just consume you. And so there's another good point you mentioned as well about he's given up alcohol and I presume drugs as well. And so sobriety is a key component to not just overall health, but I mean, it's particular mental health, being emotionally sober, aids and everything. And that really goes to sort of highlight the importance when it comes to healing, comes to being, living a whole life, really. If your vessel, your body is not healthy, then typically that's going to be the weakest link. Typically, your resilience is going to take a hammering if your vessel isn't, taken care of, whether that be sleep, nutrition, movement, whatever it may be. But in particular, you start adding, alcohol into that. It really is, you're not doing yourself any favors at all. And so I think a lot of the issues in our society come from this readily accepted notion that alcohol's okay, or the odd glass here and there. And I think it's difficult for some people to have that conversation, quite, honestly, maybe it's just 1 or 2 glasses a night, it's just helps me relax. All of those to me are warning signs. All of those are little red flags. And like you said, it is a common story. People do have that band-aid on, they do have that plaster just on it enough, coping just about, and then heaven forbid something shocking should come over the horizon, and that's it. That to me isn't a resilient person. That to me is a high risk person. And suicide is the inevitable kind of location that one will drift towards if this is unchecked. There's a wonderful organization that I'm a part of and called Save a Warrior, and one of their sort of common sayings, if you like, is the drift is always on. And what that means is a life journey going from A to B, cradle to grave, isn't a linear thing. It's not a straight line. We zigzag, and we often come off course, and often we start to drift. We drift, and the drift sometimes is very subtle. Sometimes it's just not quite taking care of your body quite enough, not really being with the right people, not the right job, not the right passions, not taking care of yourself, whatever it may be. But the drift continues and continues unless it's checked. And the act of checking is, for me, is meditation, is exercise, is hydration, all the little things on a daily basis add up, and it just checks that drift. But the drift is always on. People think that, some people, not everyone, think that this whole healing journey is once you've achieved healing, that's it. It's like, oh, done, all good, all fixed.
Tick that box, I can do something else now.
Tick that box, exactly. But it's a practice, isn't it? It's a daily thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think I was really fortunate enough to spend Christmas with my brother and his wife, and you can see those daily practices that he does. He doesn't put them in your, he doesn't put them into your face. He just does them. He writes in a journal every day. He takes time for himself. He goes outside every day. And then you can see how important those things are, and how valuable that time is. And it's probably 5 minutes at the beginning of the day, a little bit during the middle of the day, and 5 minutes at the end. But by doing that, you're doing exactly what you're saying, is that he's keeping himself from not drifting too far. He's checking himself every day, and I think he will do that for the rest of his life. And it's something that I now think about every day, because it's so important. You can see it, you can see and understand the importance of it, because it's evident from him, but lots of other people, you know, I just see that in him because I know him, how different it is. And you know, it is, you know, you saying, oh, I'll just have a drink at the end of the day because let me wind down, or I've had a really hard day at work. I can definitely, you know, relate to those things, and I can see that in myself. You know, I'm really lucky.
Me too. I can, you know, it's not like me too.
I'm really lucky that I could have a glass of wine this evening and not have another glass of wine for the next 3 weeks, and I wouldn't think about it. And if I had a stressful day at work, I'm far more likely to come home and have a cup of tea, but that's who I am. That's not who my brother was, or it was quite normal for us to have a glass of wine in the evening, and I would, and it was lovely, and so would he. And you can see those things at the beginning that if you look right back, you say, actually, maybe we could have, I don't think we could have ever caught it before we got to the point that it happened, because I think he was just so good at keeping it together. But if you look better and you look closer at other people, maybe you can notice those things.
Yeah, I think so. And yeah, because I imagine now, even just looking at your brother, you notice brighter eyes.
Yeah.
You notice, right, more vibrancy in him. And so, you know, loved ones around us that we may not see every day, but we see often, you know, they're going to notice those changes. And it is the drift, like I said, the drift is always on, but also the recovery back to center is a 1% thing at a time, rather than these massive changes that we all have to make. It's just course corrections over time. You know, that's all we have to sort of have in the back of our mind. But like I said, when that drift has been going on for a period of time, potentially unnoticed, potentially masked by, oh, that's what they always do, or whatever it may be, you know, it's those little subtle things that happen over time. Eventually, like I said, that person isn't walking with vibrancy. They're not resilient to life. Their immune system's down, for example. You know, they often get colds or whatever. You know, it's like these things, and that's not a healthy, vibrant. That's not a, you know, the full potential of humans. Don't have to be like that. That's my point. No. You know, there is a absolutely way to live in a vibrant way, and we don't have to wait for those disasters to come for us to go, oh no, I really need to make a change. But often, so many times, it does happen that way, you know, which is a shame in many ways.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So that's interesting. So what else you'd like to talk about in terms of, you know, your current relationship to? All right, well, let's talk about the relationship to your father's passing, where that is now.
Yeah.
You know, how does that? Yeah, how did you guys reconcile that event?
I think it's a really difficult thing, because I am incredibly sad every day that my dad is not here. He used to say to us that he's going to die young, and because everyone in his family died around the same age that he was, and we were like, oh no, you're definitely not going to die, don't be silly, but it kind of turned into a bit of a running joke. And then one of my best friends and I laugh, because this is awful. This is a really awful thing to think, because he was a complete workaholic. He worked because, one, he absolutely loved his job. He was a professor of pharmacy at King's College, and he was incredible, just the most amazing teacher. And he loved doing all of that, everything that kind of that entailed. And he did a lot of kind of organic chemistry. He really liked, and that was his area of expertise. And so when he retired, we were like, great, this is going to give him some time. And I actually think he had been retired for 3 weeks before he died. And I can remember sitting and speaking to a friend of mine saying, oh, we're going to find him dead at his office in King's, because he will never leave work fully. And I just feel so sad now that he's not had any time, because he worked the whole of his life. He worked so hard, and he hasn't had any time to enjoy it, really. Hasn't done any of those things that he was going to do. So I kind of feel sad that that's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
But we all die, don't we? We all die. I think he didn't have a bad death. He was poorly for 3 weeks. He was in hospital and he died. He didn't have this protracted long illness, which he would have hated. So I'm thankful for that, actually. I'm thankful that we got time as a family to do those goodbyes in a way that was controlled, and it wasn't, your dad's had a heart attack or he's had a stroke, he's got hours to live, you need to drive halfway across the country to see him. Oh my God, are you going to make it? Are you not going to make it? We were all there. He had gin and tonic, listening to some lovely music, and it was a good death.
Yeah, sounds like a glorious transition.
Yeah, I think so. It's, I can't be fixated on dates and times and stuff, because I don't miss him anymore now than I did then. I still miss him. It's
Sure.
very sad.
Sure.
But he's made me the person I am.
Mm-hmm.
And all I can do is continue doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I think that's where we are. I think he would be looking at me saying, oh God, what are you doing? Going into lecturing? You're crazy. You're going to work forever. But hopefully very secretly very proud that I'm doing it. And I just hope I'm half as good as him. So yeah, I think that's probably where I am. Yeah. I miss him just as much today as I did the day he died. But overall, he had a great life and a good death, I think, which I think has been quite healing, because we were all there. We had, I had that time with him.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing. It's
okay.
One of the hardest things is to reconcile those timelines that we project out into the future, whether it's breaking up from a relationship that, once you were talking about having kids and then, you broke up. And that timeline collapses. And it's part of the grieving process is to terms with the ending of that timeline, and really sort of remaining present with what's left behind, and the lessons, I guess, is the takeaway, I guess, for me is it's interesting to hear you say that the lecturing side of things, do you think there's a part of you that's taken lecturing up with a motivation from your father there, maybe? Is that an inspiration?
I think both my parents have doctorates. They're both very, very intelligent people. So education, further education, continual education was always a norm in our house. That was very normal that we would talk about those things. And when I was a student as a midwife, I always kind of thought, this would be quite nice. I'd quite like to do this lecturing because it's quite a nice thing to do. I was really fortunate enough to watch a few lectures that my dad did, and he was incredible. Like, he held a room of 120 people without one single PowerPoint, just him talking. So there's definitely that kind of in there. I think he would have thought that it's a good career move for me, which I definitely thought about, because it's a good transition. I think he also would have told me that I'm crazy to teach midwifery. He used to find, as a pharmacologist and a pharmacist, you work with numbers. It's either yes or no. It's very, very this kind of midwifery waffle. He read my undergraduate dissertation. He said, I don't really know what this midwifery waffle is, but it's written really well. And he wasn't able, he's like, I don't understand the content, but the rest, what you're doing is the right thing.
Yeah.
But I think he would be very proud that that's what I'm doing.
I'm sure.
And I just hope that I can be half as good as him, because he's just a born teacher. He was so engaging. So if I can take anything from that, just to try and engage my students, would be great, really.
Yeah, I'm sure he will. Your father, obviously, would he consider himself a scientist?
Yeah.
Would he consider himself an atheist?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah,
okay. So has spirituality of any sort, religious or otherwise, ever featured in your family?
So I think I probably am the most spiritual religious out of everyone. I didn't go to a religious school really, but we did, assembly every day. We sang hymns, and we always would say the Lord's Prayer at the end of assembly. Do I think that I'm religious? No. Do I think that I'm spiritual? Yes. I definitely think some things happen for a reason. Fate is definitely something that I believe in. We've never, as a family, been, wholly religious. So I think my dad has had very strong views about it, the church. He didn't want anything really to do with the church.
I mean, organized religion is as far removed from spirituality as communism, in my eyes.
I completely agree.
Just putting it out there.
I know, I can completely agree with you. But I would probably say that he was the most Christian person.
Interesting. Value-wise,
right, that I would know, in terms of helping others, being kind, being honest, having good values, being fair. I absolutely think that is who he is. And you're right, he's not churchgoer, he's not, but as a person, I would say that is who he was. And I hope that and I feel that he's instilled that in me. And so maybe when I can look at that a little bit more, I can say, well, actually, maybe I am a little bit more traditionally religious than he is, but not to an extent that I think that God's made a plan for me. I make my own plan because of the things that I do.
Your own free will is mapped into your own storyline, and you're playing that story out for yourself.
Exactly.
It's I've had an interesting journey with religion, and I was an atheist for as far as I could remember, really, in my younger years, and through my various experiences come to sort of an understanding, or my understanding at least, of something that resembles something that offers me a stabilizing, psychologically stabilizing thing in spirituality. And for me, what I mean spirituality really is I guess on the frontiers of science is the mystery and awe and wonder. And that sense of otherness. And I've had it described to me a few ways, but one in particular that always stands out for me is what resonates with me is like, I feel like we are the universe having a human experience. So it's the universe having a human experience through us, and that then gives me a concept of a higher kind of or other kind of realm of out there don't really understand it because it's so far out of reach, but it's there, it's still there, it's still a supporting factor. And I don't know, psychologically that may just come from, as babies, we can't see anything when we first born, and everything comes from above, food and everything comes from above, and then as our sights, so our first gods are our parents, and then we just, as we grow up, we push that further away. But there always seems to be psychologically this presence of someone either guarding you or watching you or supporting you, or, and I think that has psychologically a very powerful effect in mental health, and because like I said, we're built for connection. If we don't have connection and we're isolated, and isolation can be physical isolation, it could be spiritual isolation. If you're spiritually isolated and you don't have that spiritual connection, I genuinely do believe that it contributes to poor mental health. It's difficult to have this conversation when it comes to things like the NHS, because the NHS is built around pragmatic scientific models, which is great. Science is phenomenal. It puts, spaceships into space, and many other things. We can have this conversation. I'm in Tenerife, you're in the UK, and that's all science. Totally down for that. But it's not everything. It's just part of it. And that's, I think, where I lost my atheism, as I guess atheism for me also is a-religious. So the organized religion aspect of it is just fallible humans walking around in funny outfits saying that they've got the keys to God, and that I'm like, no, look, everyone can have access to God. You don't have to be a gatekeeper for that. We're beyond that now. 600 years ago maybe, but not now. So I think in terms of mental health, having a spiritual relationship of sorts, however you define it, is super important. The Alcoholic Anonymous, the whole program is anchored in that supreme power, whatever you call higher power, and it does really help hundreds and thousands and millions of people by now. So it's something to be said about that. Interesting. What else would you like to cover? Have I missed anything?
I don't think so. Whatever. I'm not sure. I think we've talked about lots of stuff, haven't we?
I think it's as many rabbit holes and things we can go down for sure.
So many.
But I think we've highlighted some common sort of patterns there of what we generally consider common struggles, if you like, around all things mental health, suicide, and just really to say to anyone that is listening, that either is struggling or knows of someone who is potentially struggling, and it's not always easy to see, but if you truly tune into your heart and your intuition, I think we sense, don't we, when people are not quite, something's off. And for that, I would just say, make no assumptions, trust your heart, but make no assumptions and just ask. Just
Absolutely.
stay connected, ask, drop in. One thing as well, when we're broaching those difficult topics, British people in particular, we're very good at laughing it off, joking it off, shrugging it off, like, just make a quick little joke about it or whatever. But if you can resist that, if you can stay present, and when asking these important questions, I think it may open the door just enough to be able to let them know that they're connected, they're not alone. And that's how we get through these struggles, is in connection.
Definitely. I think also we're also, as British people particularly, I think we're not very good at asking the real question that you want to ask. So how many times do you get someone who says something and they and I've had this when both talking about my brother and my father, that they go, I'm so sorry that your brother was ill and your dad is no longer here. Well, my dad died. I haven't lost him. I know exactly where he is. Just say it, because actually we skirting around that. I don't know what to say. I don't know how to say it. I don't know how to say that your brother's in hospital because of this, and I don't know how that. I don't know those things. That is then really hard for the other person, because I've sat in that place to know how to react to you, because it feels like you're asking because you think, oh, I should ask and I don't want to know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
And that then automatically does what we do as normal. But no, I'm fine. There's nothing wrong with it. It's okay. Everything's all right. I'm okay.
Right.
Because the foundation that you've put in that question, the emphasis that you put in that question is, I don't really know how to say this, but I think I probably should say this. So I'm just going to ask it quickly and hope that you don't say anything. And you're absolutely right in saying just ask the question. But if you don't feel confident to ask the question in an open way and be able to take on that answer from somebody, ask someone else to do it who feels okay to do that, to say that. It's all right, I think, to not feel comfortable saying those words.
That would be progress. Just even admitting that openly. That's great. Yeah, I agree.
It's really difficult, I think, to get everybody to be able to say those words. If we can identify the people that are really struggling and get somebody in their close friendship group, family group, to be able to have those conversations where it's a really open conversation and there's no kind of pressure of, oh, I think I need to ask that question, but I don't really know what to do if you gave me the answer that I think you're going to give me. Because I think that's also scary, isn't it? If you ask someone how they are, and I get this from work as well as I have done being that person, and they go, actually, I feel awful today. And coming here, I thought about jumping under the train. You then, as that person, have to manage that situation. And it's scary.
Yeah, I one thing I'd say definitely about that, this whole, so again, humans we're designed for struggle and connection. And we're particularly in this day and age pretty poor at both. And the connection piece for me, again, 1% a day, little things that we can do, little practices that we can do. And this took me a lot of work. My nervous system would react, and I would probably put words to that reaction, such as nervous, scared. Those are the kind of descriptors I would put to this reaction of looking someone in the eyes and just holding that gaze, and asking a difficult question, or even just silently eye gazing as a practice terrified me. It terrified me. Now, over time, my nervous system adjusted to that, and the level of intimacy and connection that I developed over time allows me now to ask difficult questions of my clients, of my friends, my loved ones, stay with them, fully present, looking at them, not making a joke, and more importantly, not fixing anything. Literally just being with them. Are you okay? Just open it up with that. And don't smile, don't do anything. The other practice is hugging someone, especially as a man, and not tapping their back. Like, men, if you could hug each other, right, and just hold for 5 seconds till it gets uncomfortable. Some blokes is like a second, but till it gets uncomfortable, and then just hold it a little bit more. and just watch their reaction. Let them know you're going to do it. But my point is, genuinely, like, if you can, intimacy and connection for me, quality connection with another human being is another word for intimacy. And intimacy doesn't have to be sexual. It just has to mean that I'm willing to be vulnerable with you, stay in connection, and I'm not afraid of any hard emotional topics that are going to come up. My nervous system is regulated so much that I actually can be fully present to whatever's going to show up, and we can navigate that. Now, if you can do that for another human being, what you've just done for them is offer them safety, trust. It's just like, oh my God, finally, I can just finally truly express what's on this burden that I've got, and just share it, knowing that other person's just going to receive it, not fix it, not make me wrong for it, just receive it, because we've got that intimate, trusting connection, that vulnerability.
And that's so important, that when you ask those questions, you have that ability to do that
It takes time.
It really does take time. And I vouch for that, from both being the person that is asking those questions to being asked those questions. And it's, do you know what, sometimes the person that you least expect, who will be that person that will do exactly what you said, and it will give you that time and put you in that space, and you think, oh my God, I've just unburdened myself to you, who I never in a million years thought I would do that to. But you've obviously made it so safe for me to feel that I can do that, that is, and now I can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And you know, this is why we can't be isolated. This is why trying to do all this work on your own is impossible. It doesn't work like that.
Absolutely. No.
You know, one of the most profound spiritual experiences any one of us can have is in relationship. You know, I mean, I've been through my fair share, and I must say that in terms of personal growth, never has it as accelerated and rapid as when I'm in relationship. So yeah, it's everything. But we need to, as a collective, become better at connection, at recognizing struggle and the difference between struggle and suffering. Suffering is really just, in my opinion, optional. It's where one is not deciding to pick up their burden. It's deciding that, you know, maybe they're getting something out of it for not doing the change is necessary. You know, if you're choosing to suffer, if you're choosing to carry on drinking, if you're choosing to, you know, obviously addiction, dependence and all that aside, but you know, there's definitely a difference there, and recognize that it's okay to struggle. We're designed for it and we're good at it, and there's things that we can do to improve it, but you know, it's a natural part of life. All right, thank you once again.
That's a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Enjoyed it. Yeah, no, absolutely. We'll be putting this out to all the various platforms, and do drop a like if this is on YouTube, and so follow us along. There are going to be plenty more podcasts coming down the pipe, which I'm very excited about as we continue to sort of develop this conversation and get the word out there. Thanks for listening to the Returning Warrior podcast, and I'll see you all soon. Bye-bye.